Alrighty. Sliding into position as usual, last minute, because of coffee, usually. G'day, Stefan. Stefan is here. Long time no speak. All right, I've got a lot of stuff today, and some of this is going to be some live data breaching as well, live releasing of data breaching. Also, in part because I rushed and ran short of time. But tell you what, let's start where we normally start. I'll put that on Do Not Disturb. Mind you, it's my own YouTube notification disturbing me, so yeah. Do Not Disturb. Alrighty. Sponsor again is 1Password, which is good timing because I am just about to head off and see the 1Password folks. We'll talk about that in a moment. I will be seeing 1Password and some golf next week. We'll come back to that. 1Password Extended Access Management. Secure every sign-in for every app on every device. And of course, we are talking about XAM, which came by way of the Collide acquisition sometime earlier this year. Secure every sign-in for every app on every device. Modern security and IT teams need to make sure every identity device and application is secure. Only 1Password registered. Extended Access Management, or XAM, checks every box. So a big thanks to 1Password. Between 1Password and Collide, there is no longer standing sponsors. So thank you very much for all those folks. Wayne says, the live always starts after you have started talking. You need a stream start screen. You won't see this in the, yeah, I don't know. I need to do a lot of things better. But you know, when I watch it back, like if I go and watch the other ones, there's always a pause at the beginning. So maybe what I need to do is wait until it definitely says go live. And then when people just watch this back later on, I'm just sitting here just waiting for it to say live. We work it out as casual. And then every time I've thought about making it more formal, like having someone to edit stuff or theme song, it's like, no, I don't feel the necessity for that. Let's move on. The US bits. Where am I going to be? So, as I mentioned before, it was 2019, the last time we were in the US. Things got kind of weird after that, and it's just been a very strange time, even since travel and everything started resuming. And there's just something about traveling to the US from Australia at the moment, and I'm quite sure it's not just Qantas, who we end up being very loyal to, but for some reason, flying to the US has just become extraordinarily expensive, so much more so than going to Europe. Even doing longer legs to Europe, like just flying to the west coast of the US, which we can do in one hop, was like a more expensive flight than flying all the way from here to Oslo and going through Dubai and doing all that sort of thing. Just become a really, really expensive thing. If I'm honest, there are many aspects of traveling to the US that try my patience. The tipping is a good example. In case you're from America and go, what's weird about that? I cannot think of a single other place in the world I've been to, other than Israel, where tipping is expected and you're in trouble if you don't do it. I think here in Australia, I would tip maybe 1 in 100 times because it's a gratuity. Even Norway's got a weird thing. And it says 200, but you have to type in the amount that you want to pay. Now, you can't make it less. Ask me how I know. But you can make it more, but nobody does. You just type in the number and then you press enter. Or here in Australia, there'll be, you know, whether it's a hotel or a restaurant or whatever, there'll be a line for tip. Nobody fills that in. You know who fills that in? American tourists. Like, that's all who does it. Anyway, I find that a very weird thing. Well, I'm on my high horse about this. We're booking things like hire cars or hotels. And you go to the website and it's like, here's the hire car. And for the sake of argument, it's $100. And you go, okay, cool. Let me, excuse me, metaphorically, get the $100 out of my wallet, ready to pay this. And then you go to pay it and it's like, it's not $100. You forgot the tax and you forgot the So there's always like three things, something else and something else. And it's $135. Oh, why didn't you just tell me it was $135? You actually have laws in Australia about this. Like, you can't misrepresent the price. You've got to have the whole price. Anyway, Mike really struggles with the US tipping culture. I think it's one of the things I feel, and I'm going to try and talk myself out of going, but I just feel like as soon as you go into a restaurant or something, there's like this expectation. It's like, how can I earn my tip? We're in Vegas in 2019 during the cybersecurity things. I remember I was with Scott Helm and we were hanging out in the pool. We had a cabana. And so we're going to be here all day. And like halfway through the day, the waitress comes over and she's like, I'm finishing my shift. Here's your bill. It's like, well, that's great. We're not finishing our shift. Our shift is going to go a long time today. But obviously what she wanted was to finish the bill so that we could add the tip so she could cash in for what she did before. Just pay people properly, right? And get rid of the tipping thing. James hates tipping. Just tell me the price. In my state, we are ending tipping culture. Which state is that, James? That's fascinating. I keep thinking back to like that. If everyone's seen Reservoir Dogs before, and right in the opening scene when they're sitting in the cafe, Mr. Pink's like, I don't tip. And he gets absolutely reamed for not tipping because the servers are dependent on the tips in order to sustain themselves because minimum wage is not enough, which sounds like a problem with minimum wage. Michigan. Oh, interesting. I wonder if that's something that's happening broader than just Michigan. One of the reasons I like things like Uber, because you just, taxi, there's that implicit obligation to tip. Uber is just like, see you suckers, like I'm out of here. What else is in here? Neil, I'm from the UK and in US now, tipping is odd and all the random taxes added in hotels. Yeah. That's sort of the things that gets me. I don't know. I think philosophically, I have a very strong view on transparency, which we'll talk about today as well. And not representing the entire thing is a bit of a mind. Yeah, Carl, there's something more genuine about the start. Weird sound issues such as speed, time, not production. Spend the time on life, not production. Yes. Good. Right. So, US travel. So we're heading out on Monday over to the US now, as well as everything being extraordinarily expensive now. It's also a very, very long journey to get to the East Coast. So we're going to DC to begin with, because that's where, well, I guess that's their Canberra, isn't it? That's their government HQ. But to get to DC, we need to drive up to Brisbane, fly down to Sydney, fly to Dallas. Sydney to Dallas used to be one of the longest flights in the world. And it's not that the flight got shorter, we just got other long flights. I think, what are we at, like 14 hours or something? What's my trip at say? Sydney to Dallas. Sydney to Dallas is 15 hours and 15 minutes. The longest time I ever spent on an airplane was Sydney to Dallas, because I got on the plane in Sydney and we got halfway down the runway and then the pilot changed his mind because the door wasn't shut or something like that. And we went all the way back to the terminal and we were there for long enough for me to watch an entire movie. I'm sure it was more than 2 hours. Still sitting in the seats. We're at that borderline thing where the pilot's like, I'm not sure if we should get everyone off and fix the problem and then reboard. And then get everyone back on. But that must have been more than 17 hours on that plane. So anyway, that's 15 and a quarter hours just to Dallas. And then, of course, we've got to then get on another flight off to DC. So that's going to be a bit brutal. That is about as bad as travel gets. So I think maybe when we came back from Europe last time, it was possibly just worse because we had to go from Athens to Oslo to Dubai to Brisbane. That was terrible. So anyway, we will be over in DC for a bit. We'll be in Pittsburgh for a bit. We will be going to Montreal, where 1Password is sponsoring the President's Cup alongside Rolex. Some nice brand placement there for 1Password. President's Cup is a golf game. Apparently it's very prestigious. So we'll be going and, I guess, talking cyber to 1Password guests there. So that will be nice. So we'll be there on Friday next week. We'll be there on the weekend before heading to Ottawa, which is Canada's Canberra, Canada's capital city with all the government folks there. So we'll be seeing some folks over there going to Vegas for a couple of nights, going out into the desert for a getaway for a few nights. I will send photos of that. This place looks absolutely freaking epic. I'm really looking forward to that. And then going to San Francisco and rounding out the trip in San Francisco, seeing a bunch of tech folks there before coming home to Australia, where it will be even more summery than now, which is I'm really, really excited about. Mike says, don't get me started on hotel resort fees. Brian says, no, it is everywhere. They basically increased the minimum wage to $15 an hour. But before that, people felt bad it was $7 and started tipping a bunch. My co-workers would give me grief for leaving a 10% tip. Brian says, for just getting a coffee, apparently I should have tipped 25%. It's quite insane. Yes, it's good to know tipping. Oz for my trip there. Yeah, no one tips in Australia, mate. No one. Well, you would tip if you got some sort of extraordinary service. The other thing is, and maybe it's a little bit the same in the US, I feel back in the day when you'd leave cash, you'd round it up. You know, you go out for a meal and it's $95 or something like that, and you'd give them $100, and you go, okay, well there's your tip. But now, of course, it's just doesn't matter what it is. But no one will look strange at you if you don't tip, and if you do tip, the server will be like, holy shit, someone tipped me. That's amazing. It just doesn't happen, and like the extent with which we travel, and there are certainly places where it's a little bit more common than others. I'm trying to think where I might have been when we were in Greece. In Mykonos recently, I felt it was a bit more common, but I never did it. And it's funny because Charlotte feels guilty about it. I don't care. I don't feel guilty. It's like, here's the machine, put the tip in, 0, enter. And as far as I know, no one spat in our food or anything like that. So, again, like we do tip very occasionally here, if it's extraordinary. But that's like there's a baseline expectation. Everyone needs to do the baseline, like bring your food, smile, be polite, tell you what's on the menu, effectively not be an asshole. And then if they're extraordinary and exceptional, then you're like, okay, I'll throw you a little tip. Unless, no, I won't get started on the guns. No, it normally doesn't impact us very much. All right, where are we up to? What else do I have on the list? What day is it? Where's my tweet? It's all in there. This week's data breaches. Right, so we're going to talk about a couple of data breaches that are there already. I'm going to tweet the message about another one. Oh, it's on my laptop. I've got to turn over there. That's all right. Let's talk about the week in data breaches. I actually had about a week there where I did not load any data breaches. Might have even been 10 days. And that was due to nothing new and significant. And also, I was writing a lot of documentation, Stefan, for our API stuff, and trying to get to grips with all that. So the two breaches I did load this week, and we'll talk about the third one in a moment. One of them is Gamesbox. In 2020, the now defunct site Gamesbox suffered a data breach, redistributed later as part of a larger corpus. It was part of that mother of all breaches corpus. 1.4 million email addresses, username, gender, age, and password stored as hash or plain text. 94% of those were already in HelloEmpone. Now, I think I've explained before, I do have, without getting into the details of it, a long list and a large corpus of data that was provided to me some time ago. And I literally just go back to it when there's a bit of a break in the normal breach cadence, or when I want to test a process or something, and I go, okay, let's just find the next largest one, and I'll process that and load it. So this was one of those older ones. A newer one, can I try and pronounce this? Instituto Nacional de Deportes de Chile, National Sports Institute of Chile. That was a new one, 1.7 million rows with 320,000 email addresses breached and published last week. Data included name, gender, date of birth, bcrypt password hash, 52% of those already in Have I Been Pwned. Right, now, before I do this next one, let's just make sure that it has finished loading, and then we'll talk about that. I can verbally talk you through this process. So we're still in this final stages of rollover from the old table storage model through to the new SQL Server model, where everything is now going into a relational database, which gives us some very, very cool things to do. We're building out a massively cached Cloudflare front end, which I'm sure probably both Stefan and I think will probably write about in time to come, because it is a very, very cool setup. Now I'm just going to run the query to tell us the percentage on this new breach. Breach load statistics, where it's equal to that name. And I'm just making sure all this works before we name this organization and start to 69%. And the reason I'm over here on the other laptop is sometimes I sit downstairs and process data breaches. And part of the data from this one is still sitting over here. And this is what I'm going to use to verify that the load is complete. Checking, making sure I'm not a robot. Okay, that one is correct. So this data breach, which I'm now going to tweet out, is called Hunt Stand. Nothing to do with me. Nothing at all. It is a, what do they call it? Hunting and land management. Hunting and land management service. Now I'm just going to put in the correct percentage of existing breached accounts, and then we'll pop that in the Twitter over here. I think we all agreed we're still calling it Twitter, aren't we? I'm still calling it Twitter. Okay, there's the tweet for that one. There's the Mastodon for that one. I'm not even sure if anyone's there reading it. That's going to upset some people. And then I go and I retweet it over here. And what do you do on Mastodon? Do you That's starting to sound a bit weird. Plug that from there, and then I've got to do the Facebook thing too, and then it starts beeping. Mastodon starts beeping every time someone shares it. Now, Hunt Stand, this one appeared earlier on in the year, just as I drop in the last messaging here. Earlier on in the year, 2.8 million records in here, and I'm going to start to talk about this incident in particular, and then something else I'm dealing with at the moment, which is just highlighting everything that is wrong with data breach disclosure right now. So this data appeared earlier in the year. Someone sent it to me. I verified it. It was clearly legit. I couldn't find any news, any press on it, which meant I was going to have to go through disclosure hell. And when I say hell, it's not just trying to reach the right people. It's also then trying to not look like, well, first of all, have them know that I'm not the bad guy and I'm not doing weird stuff with their data as a, trying to shake them down for money or all the sorts of things I imagine organizations are worried about when they first hear from me. And then I've got to worry about them trying to either downplay the incident or suppress it altogether. And I'll come back to that in a moment. And it's just, it takes the joy out of running a service that otherwise I think is a fascinating experience. So this appeared earlier on. Now, as you'll see, if you look at the tweet from Have I Been Pwned now, I have linked through to a story. So a story did appear about it. But then it's like, well, does the organization know? Because I can't find any disclosure notice or anything from them. I can't see any messages on their social. Like I couldn't see anything to suggest that this organization knew about it. So I reached out to them via the Contact Us form. I filled that out 3 days ago. I like to give an organization 3 days, and I hadn't heard anything back. So not hearing anything back, so all right, I'm going to go and load that data now, because the concern I have is pretty much every data breach I'm loading is already published to a popular hacking forum. It's in broad circulation. Is this Facebook post actually loaded or not? What are you doing there? It's coming. It's in broad circulation. Many other, much more nefarious people have access to this data. So I want to get the notification out there. I want people to know that this incident has happened so that they can start protecting themselves. Why won't Facebook post that? Let's try this again. Now, to that effect, the sooner people know, the much more useful it is for them and the much better they can protect themselves. And I had 6,000 something subscribers in there too, so they're all getting emails at the moment. All right, now it's gone. Thank you. Facebook post has worked. So the paradox that I find myself in is a data breach has happened. The sooner I can let people know about the data breach, the more valuable it is for them and the less valuable it is for the attackers that are exploiting people that haven't yet changed their passwords or aren't on the lookout for all the sort of spammy, fishy, shady stuff that happens after so many data breaches. So I'm trying to push it forward as fast as I can, but I'm also trying to give the organisation sufficient heads up, because if I email thousands of people, some of them will get in touch with the organisation and go, hey, why didn't you tell me about this? So I at least want to give them the opportunity. And then if they ignore the message I sent to them, and HuntStand, I did get an automated reply from their ticketing system saying, we've got your message. What do they actually say? Because normally they're like, if necessary, we'll get back to you, or something to that effect. Let's see if I can find it. HuntStand. HuntStand. Thank you for reaching out to HuntStand support. We have received your email. Here's your ticket ID. A member of the support team will be in touch with you shortly. Now, I say this as just this morning I was complaining to Charlotte about just how many spam tickets we had overnight. We had a much higher number of spam tickets for Have I Been Pwned overnight than what we did actual legitimate stuff. And I'm sure that it's the same for HuntStand and every one of these other services. So again, we have the problem of how do we actually get serious data breaches in front of people so that they can respond and take it seriously and not just put it in the spammy bucket. And I think I just reached the point where it's like, look, I've tried, I've given them notice. If you want to ignore it after that, well, at least all the individuals know, and the individuals are protected. Certainly they haven't been pwned once. And then it's more an issue of the organisation being caught a bit unaware. But like, how far do you go to try and do the disclosure? Now, speaking more broadly, so as not to throw any particular one organisation under the bus, I am constantly finding a desire to suppress data breaches, not just from the public and from the press, but also from the individuals. And what I'm seeing is organisations self-assessing what they think is the necessity for disclosure. Now, I'm writing up a big blog post on this, and it's almost ready to go. I think I'll finish up on the plane or something, one of the planes. There is a legal requirement that is different in different jurisdictions, and it's different based on organisation size, and then it's different based on the nature of the data, and there's different based on various other factors, where there is an obligation to quote unquote report. Now, report can mean reporting to your local regulator, and that's it. Report can mean reporting to impacted individuals. And where I'm finding the problem is when one or both of those legal requirements is not met. Let's say it's fairly benign data, and just so I don't throw this current organisation under the bus, I'll speak very generically and not talk about what I mean by benign data, but use your common sense. You know, it's not your sexuality and your credit cards. Where I'm finding the problem is when it's fairly benign data and the organisation deems that there is not a legal requirement to notify. And then they also deem that they do not want to notify the individuals regardless of the lack of a legal requirement. And then you've got me going, well, I've got however many thousands of subscribers in there. I've got an ethical requirement to disclose. I'm going to let them know. And some organisations don't like that. And some organisations particularly don't like it when it's like, not only am I going to let them know, but it's going to be on the timeline. Other people would be able to see that you've had a data breach. And the arguments I see for not wanting me to do that are purely self-serving. And what I mean by that is it is in the best interest of the organisation, the shareholders, the board, whoever it may be. It is never in the best interest of the individuals, although it can be wrapped up that way. We would like to protect our customers by not publicising information about this, otherwise the hackers will go and look for the data. This is like literally one of the arguments that I hear. Now, again, keep in mind, this data is usually already on a public hacking forum. It's circulated between hundreds, if not thousands of hands. These days, you've got various Twitter accounts that tweet when things do appear on public hacking forums. So you end up with the worst people having the data, the victims not knowing about it, and the organisation saying that that is in the best interest of the customers. Now, I would be much happier if the organisation said, this will make us look bad and we'd like you not to do that. Because at least it would be honest. But what would make them look even worse? I got to have some water. What would make them look even worse is if people knew that they were trying to suppress it because they didn't want to look bad and they were doing that at the expense of the individuals. And we don't whatever. We don't have sufficient mandates or protections for individuals to force the hand of organisations to do disclosure in cases like that. So you end up in this. That's better. You end up in this really awkward middle ground. You being us, have I been pwned? This really awkward middle ground where this organisation, and again, this is something that happens many, many times over. It's not just the current situation. This organisation is implying that there could be organisational damage if news about the data breach breaks, i.e. if you talk about it, it's going to cause damages and they might not like that and there might be recourse. That is sort of several layers deep in the implication in many of these discussions. And all the while, the victims are there not having known about it. And you know, the interesting thing is, and I'll be talking about this a lot as I go on my travels to the US and Canada as well, every time I have this discussion with governments and law enforcement agencies, everyone is very adamant on the importance of disclosure, on the importance of notifying data breach victims about their exposure. There is never a time I speak to anyone in positions of authority where they say, nah, it's not that important. You know what I mean? Like, it's always an important thing. It's always an important thing. We'll see. I think I think this one in general has got a long way to play out yet. There's an organisational maturity that's just missing there. We do have changes coming in Australia to our privacy laws that will lower that legal bar so that more organisations will be in positions where they are legally obligated to disclose. I have a feeling that will still prioritise disclosure to the regulators as opposed to disclosure to the individuals. But in this blog post I'm writing up, in case you're sitting there going, well, I'm in Europe, I've got GDPR. No, you don't. Well, you do, but that doesn't mean that you get notified. And the example that I've got in here is around Deezer, the French streaming music service. And that was, I think it was like late 2000 or late 2020 rather. You know, I'm fine until I sit down and start talking. Deezer was like late 2020 and they put a notice on their website. They didn't tell individuals. I told individuals because I think there were like 215 million people in there. And then many, many, many months later, Deezer eventually lets everyone know. And they put out a statement in one of their disclosure notices saying that they've done all of their legally obligated things or something to that effect, which was probably true. But the big bit that keeps getting missed here is that it's not a legal obligation, even under GDPR, in many cases, to notify individuals. And then individuals are like, and to be honest, I don't care where you are in the world, I don't care what the privacy law says you need to do, there's a question of what you should do. And what you should do is when you lose, air quoting, because you still have it, lose someone's data, you let them know. Like, it is not a hard problem. And you certainly don't make life hard on people like me that are just trying to support those victims. Let's have a look at the chats here. James, toots. Okay, Mastodon are toots. Of course they are. I like Mastodon. I can add to my RSS feed. There's an API, and there is no promoted BS. Plus, I like the smaller communities. James likes having less friends. Kidding. Mike says, bots sending big bounties have a lot to answer for here. I think in terms of orgs ignoring legit contacts for security issues. You're right, that, and I've obviously written about it before. Like that is a major problem when there are so many people out there trying to shake people down for money, shake organizations down for money, with the claim of data breaches. And I think somewhere down here, James mentioned Security.txt. James said, how often do you find the contact information in security? Once. Out of every disclosure that I've done, once. And by the time that one was found, I didn't even look for it. Honestly, I've stopped looking for it because it is so extraordinarily rare. It just doesn't happen. I mean, it's so frustrating because that's what it's there for. Stefan, my guess next to never. There you go. Way too few websites are using that. I think Scott Helm has some data on it. Crawler.ninja. Ninja is the TLD, in case you're wondering why that sounds like a weird URL. Scott's Crawler.ninja has got stats on the number of organizations. In fact, the websites using a Security.txt ranked from largest to smallest. And look, it's increasing, don't get me wrong. And I think we will see more adoption in time too. But it's extraordinarily rare, and I would also argue that it's probably more the organizations that are more security aware to begin with and perhaps less likely to have data breaches that are using Security.txt. James says, I didn't think it was widely used. I almost never hear it mentioned. Okay, well, tell you what, let's pull the stats. If I go to, and I'll drop this in the chat, crawler.ninja, high-level statistics updated daily with each crawl, and then we go down to Security.txt sites. I'm going to copy that URL. I'm going to drop it here in the chat in case anyone wants to have a look at that. How many entries are there? So this is the top 1 million sites. There are few enough that I can reliably copy this and paste it into a notepad window and see that they're 2,500. 2,574 websites out of the top 1 million are using Security.txt. So off the top of my head, is that 1/4%? Feels like it. Where's Have I Been Pwned now? Have I Been Pwned is the 8,404th largest website in the world. It has a Security.txt. Now these are based on the Tranco list as well. What about Troy Hunt? Where's Troy Hunt? It's definitely in there somewhere. Scott, why am I in there? Definitely a top million website. And I definitely have a Security.txt. Scott needs to check his stats. It might have been Cloudflare blocking crawling, or they shouldn't do that for Security.txt though. All right, so yeah, 1/4%. Stefan says, Scott saw that even the sites that had already been breached, back when the breach count was around 640 sites, only 6 had properly implemented Security.txt. I know Dropbox does, and they're obviously on Have I Been Pwned. Mike says, one thing I'd love is, for example, ingress controllers like Nginx Traffics to have a default Security.txt for all ingress and instance managers, both documented and encouraged. I think there are ways of making Security.txt more, why am I talking on my watch? More easily accessible by more people. Let's just stick with that. We'll talk more about that later on. Mike says, I think even some large technology orgs just don't know it's a thing. Now, I kid you not, it's a true story. I did a workshop once with an Aussie bank. You know what, I'm going to see if they have it. And then I'll finish the story. I'm not going to show you who they are because it was a paying customer as well. I don't want to chuck them under the bus. Security. I'm just going to go to Security.txt on Have I Been Pwned, make sure I've got that path right. Now, I'm going to take that path and I'm going to go to this bank. .com.au. Do they have it yet? Page not found. Okay. Now, let's check our 4 Aussie banks. And it's one of the big 4, and I won't say which one it is. And I won't tell you which one I did first, because that would kind of give that away. Let's try this one. Error 404, page not found. Okay. Let's try the next one. We couldn't find that page. This sucks, man. What a good time to be in the industry. And the last big Aussie 4 bank. Oops, this page can't be found. All right, so reversing the order of all of these in no particular randomised fashion. Westpac, ANZ, NAB, Commonwealth Bank of Australia. Our big 4 Aussie banks, not a single one has a security.txt file. Now, interestingly, on this particular one, there is a link to security down the bottom. Safety first. Discover how we can work together. Now, there is something here about reporting suspicious activity, and I mean, all this is consumer facing. There is not a security.txt on any of our big 4 banks. You know what I should do? In fact, if someone else wants to do this, here's a free tip for a cool blog post. Many years ago, I wrote a blog post called something about bank grade security. This must have been about a decade ago now. And what I did is I went through and I tested via SSL Labs. This was the 4th of May, 2015. Tested via SSL Labs the ranking that each of our Australian banks, not just the big 4, but I've got, let's call it 20 different banks here, tested the ratings, and a whole bunch of them got B's was the most common. There was a C, and then there was 3 F's. So they did terribly. I would love for someone to go through, and you can do this in different parts of the world. Find the biggest banks in your part of the world. How many of them actually have a security.txt file at all, let alone one with decent information in it too. James says, I heard there are only like 4 big banks in Australia. Yeah, so we call them the big 4, the 4 I just mentioned. But there are many others. So when I look at my bank grade security here, there's also Bankwest and IMB and Heritage and ING Direct, Bank McHugh, Bendigo Bank, Beyond, CUA, it goes on and on. Lots of smaller ones. Yeah, but apparently none of them have a security.txt, which is kind of wild. Where were we? The problem with data breaches, the problem with reporting. Yeah. Exploding pages. Now, I only put this in here because I did have a couple of press inquiries about this. And I think it was first of all, it was a massively fascinating story. Like to wake up and go, so in Palestine, a whole bunch of pages exploded and killed some people, and then thousands of people are injured as well. We'll put that up there with the news I didn't expect to wake up to this week. And the question that I was getting from media is, could you hack a pager to explode? Now, as far as I know, someone tell me if I'm wrong. As far as I know, we haven't yet seen any details on how this actually happened. However, I think we could all, just by applying a bit of like Occam's razor to the whole thing, we could all reasonably assume that a consumer level device shipped out en masse in the modern era has no way, without some form of tampering, of receiving a message and frickin' exploding. There's just no way that happens. And when you do see fires on things like phones, for example, we're all seeing videos of, someone's left their phone under a pillow on the charger or something like that, or one of the lithium-ion batteries has shit itself, and it starts smoking. They start smoking and they gradually catch on fire. They don't explode and kill people. It's just not something that happens. So there has to have been some tampering with the devices. And I think that's the industry consensus now. So if there's tampering with the devices, that needs to happen somewhere between the point of manufacture, apparently the Taiwanese pages, so assuming that it wasn't someone in Taiwan implanting explosives in there, has to happen somewhere between there and ultimately the delivery through into the pockets of all the people that were wearing these things when they blew up. Now, there is a fascinating story somewhere in there, and I hope we hear about it one day. I mean, this is like Stuxnet levels of coordination. Perhaps not sophistication. We'll see. I'm still curious. Even if you did have a pager yourself and you had all of the resources of Mossad and you were sitting there going, how do I make the thing explode? Without it looking like it's going to explode, because it obviously looked like normal pages. There's some fascinating level of coordination in there, and I'm really, really interested to hear how that actually happened. So clearly a pipeline-based attack. Someone got in the pipeline before those devices got to the individuals. And of course, then it was sophisticated enough to be able to coordinate it via, one would assume, a message sent to the device. I would imagine it wasn't pre-programmed to all happen at the same time. Maybe it was. But you would think a device that connects to a cellular network and can receive messages. If you're able to tamper with it and make the damn thing explode, you could probably do that on the prompt of a message. I think the InfoSec side of it, so I really don't think it's an InfoSec story. Someone's not hacked the device to explode. I think the interesting InfoSec sides of it is it seems like pages became the preferred device of Hezbollah because they were worried about the interception of messages on phones, smartphones, the interception or the hacking of the devices. So we're worried about these really intelligent modern devices. Let's stop using those and we'll use something old school. I think what will be really interesting, being by no means a military expert here, but I would imagine what's going to be interesting is what does that do to the confidence in the communication channels that people use? Like, what do you trust? What do you trust? The next time someone gets any sort of a device for someone in Hezbollah, and they, whether it's a phone or a pager or a walkie-talkie, what do you trust? Do you want to put that thing down next to sensitive areas of the body or anywhere near the body? What's that going to do to their communications? I think the long tail of this is going to be much more interesting than the actual incident itself. My 2 cents. Mike's looking at UK banks. Just done 3 UK banks. 2 largest and 1 bank with 3 out of 3 success. Not bad. Well done. Okay. Interesting. James says, one of the big 4 AU banks has a huge ATM glitch, a real one, not the TikTok one. They didn't even prosecute because they were so embarrassed after the guy stole around $1 million. Wow. James says, I heard the company licenses the pager to a third party. They confirmed it was messages. Pages can't be tracked. That's what makes them useful. Full of caveats today, but also not a cellular expert. Surely pages must connect to a cell tower somewhere. I mean, how do they receive messages? If you know the answer, drop it into the chat below. All right, just being conscious of time. The other thing I shared this week was the video of the 3D printing talk that my daughter Elle, 11 at the time, did in Oslo a few months ago. So this video is now out on YouTube. I am biased. I think it is awesome. I've watched so many parts of it back again. I haven't sat there and watched the whole thing. I just kept zipping through the different bits. I think it's really, really good fun to watch. I think you can see both of us really enjoying it. Very proud to see her having the confidence to stand up there in front of a room full of hundreds of people. Stefan, I'm sure you've been on that stage or certainly been in that room before as well. You're standing there on a suspended stage looking up into a black abyss of seats in a stadium in Oslo, and it was just full of people. And she's in there like catapulting things around with a 3D printed catapult with 3D printed projectiles and glow-in-the-dark filament. Particularly towards the end, I think I said in the blog post I put about it, it's like the 55-minute mark. She's just like catapulting stuff in the audience and like seeing the fun that she's having. You can hear the laughter from the audience as well. It's just really, really lovely. So if you want a feel-good video where you might actually learn some stuff too, if I had to watch this video 3.5 years ago, I would have learned stuff. So now, unrelated to that video, but on my desk, I'm surrounded by 3D rocket parts. So I'm building a Saturn V rocket. So these, and I have no good reason to do it other than I spend too much time sitting here like looking at code or filling out vendor forms, screaming at resellers. And it's nice to actually have a little project to build some stuff. So there's a Saturn V rocket. Bought it off Fab 365 for about $5. Spent many times more than that on filament. And we're just sort of printing out all the little parts of the rockets and so on. And this will all get, I think it's pretty much going to be finished today, glued together, and then there'll be this cool Saturn V rocket sitting there. I did also upgrade my Prusa Mark IV to a Prusa Mark IVS. There is an upgrade kit. For those of you in the 3D printing world, I think it was like $150 or something like that. Much better cooling. Cooling seems to be the big difference. And interestingly, I noticed when I printed this, you can't quite see how many different bits and pieces I've got sitting here on the desk, but I had probably 20 different little grey bits, including things like these fins, which print standing up. Which way was it? It's probably like that, wasn't it? And no stringing, like no stringing. So for the uninitiated, if you're printing two different parts on a print bed, so these printed flat like that, if you're printing these, it's going to print the first layer of one, and then the print head is going to move over to the other one, and it's going to print the first layer of that. And then it's going to print the second layer and move over, and so on and so forth. And as it moves between each one, you've got a nozzle that's running at about 220 degrees Celsius, and you've got this filament hanging off the end of it, and it does get retracted into the nozzle before it moves, but very often you get what's referred to as stringing, where you end up with all these little lines that look like string, just very, very fine lines of filament between the objects, and they make your prints a bit messy. And this Mark IV's is just not doing it at all, and I wonder if it's around the cooling that's in that fan. So just super, super happy, and really cool detail on these as well, on the little Saturn V rocket. So yeah, that's good fun. See the comments before we start to wrap this up for last one in Australia for a while. Stephen, it was an impressive talk by Alan yourself. Thanks, mate. Yeah, it was good fun. Now, Stefan, I just saw they leveled up with walkie-talkies blowing up yesterday as well. And yeah, I thought I had seen something about that, but again, what do you trust? You know, like we in this industry are talking about pipelines and trust, and this is why we have end-to-end encryption and all the rest of it, and we're worried about the interception of our messages. There, you're worried about your freaking device blowing up. Like that's just fascinating. What do you trust? James says conventional pager towers are like TV towers, just one powerful signal in each area. There are two-way pagers, but those are a little different. Okay, interesting. I learned something. I had a pager once. Trying to remember how long ago it was. I think it was 1994 when when I was like 18. So I have very little recollection of how that works. Stefan says, I so wanted to be there. Sounds like an awesome talk. Have to see the video now. Yeah, go watch the video. My keynote is out as well. I'll share that on the Twitters soon. The keynote I was very, very happy with too, actually. James says, zero encryption, traditional paging. Anyone can listen to the signals with an SDR. I would have believed you if you had said SSR anyway, because I don't know what that is, but I can imply it from the messages. All right, folks, I'm going to wrap it up there. I need to pack. I need to get ready. And in a few days from now, we'll head off to the US. I'll do this. I think I'll do this from Friday. Friday we are traveling from Pittsburgh to Montreal. That will be Friday their time, not Friday my time. We'll work it out. It'll be a hotel room somewhere. Thanks, folks. See you later.